So, if you haven't watched Star Wars The Force Awakens yet, for God's sake, don't watch this video. Watch the non-spoiler review video that I put up on the channel earlier, because in this video, I am going to talk about spoilers. I'm going to go more in depth into the plot, because there is a lot to talk about in this film. There's a lot of spoilers, and everything that I wanted to say critically, negatively about the film, I couldn't go into detail with in my first video because it would have gone into much more detail in the plot. I couldn't do it before. I'm going to do it now, as well as talk about what I thought about certain events in the film. So again, if you haven't seen the film yet, please don't watch this video. Don't do that to yourself. Go into that film fresh, not knowing the least amount possible. Do not watch this. Don't watch any other spoiler videos on YouTube, for God's sake. Final warning. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So, the first and most obvious thing, the most obvious event that happens in this film: Han Solo dies. Han Solo dies. He is killed by Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren is Han and Leia's son. Now, honestly, I was absolutely fine with this. I can see people having an issue because it's Han Solo, but I genuinely believe this was the best thing they could have done, because from what I understand, Harrison Ford has actually made it known in the past that he thinks Han Solo should have died. But also, the older generation, the original trilogy generation, has to give way to the new generation. That just naturally has to happen at some point. And in The Force Awakens, Han Solo is by far the most visible member of the older generation, the original trilogy generation. He is also brilliant in the film. Han Solo is fantastic in this film. Harrison Ford, fantastic in this film. And so the fact that he is instantly, he's one of the most likable characters ever, really. And so the fact that they went for him and they killed him, it gives you the emotional impact. It passes more of the torch to the younger generation, and it makes the impact on Kylo Ren even bigger. I properly thought this was exactly the right thing to do. It was exactly the right person to kill, and it was done brilliantly. Han and Kylo Ren have a confrontation, father and son. You think for a second that Kylo is going to go with his father, and then the red saber comes out. Han Solo is dead. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. This also leads into one of the reasons why I thought Kylo Ren was a really interesting villain. It's because, as I said, you think for a second that he is going to go with his father, because he is so conflicted in this film. And that's what I really found interesting about him. He is so human in this film. You can see his mind is in total turmoil in the film, because he is with the dark side, he is with the First Order, but he can feel the light side pulling at him. And I loved it, because in the original trilogy, you've got Luke, who the Emperor is attempting to bring him into, and Vader is attempting to bring him into the dark side, and he can feel that pull of the anger, of the hatred, and he's trying to resist that. And this, it's the mirror image. You've got Kylo Ren, who has embraced the dark side, but feels the light side pulling at him. He can feel the light side of Leia. He can feel the light side of Luke pulling at him, trying to pull him back. It was brilliant. I loved that about it. Absolutely loved it. And instead, he's trying to draw inspiration from Vader and from his new master, Snoke. It really rounded the character, and it made it an actual character as opposed to a sort of nameless, faceless villain. It made it an actual believable character. I adored that. However, one thing I didn't like about Ren was what they did with him at the end, which also links into another spoiler, which it is a spoiler, but at the same time, if you didn't realize this was coming, really, Rey has the Force. Rey can use the Force. Daisy Ridley's Rey can use the Force. The problem there is the fact that a lot of this film ends up centering around Rey versus Ren, and it's awesome because of it. It's that the lightsaber fight in the forest at the end, for the most part, is it's so nice. There's no clean choreos of twirling around and doing backflips. It's dirty, it's gritty, and it's two people fighting for their lives. Fantastic because of that. For at least half of that lightsaber fight, fucking brilliant. Loved it. The problem is the fact that when Rey discovers she has Force powers, she beats Ren in a Force battle, essentially. And Ren says afterwards she's strong in the Force but untrained. The fact that she's strong in the Force but untrained means that you still should have wiped the floor with her, because you're strong in the Force but you've been trained. The fact that she was able to beat him, it shouldn't have happened, because if that happens, then he literally can't be that strong. It makes him look awful. It makes him look really weak. Frankly, the fact that someone who literally that second has discovered they have Force powers is able to beat him, that shouldn't have happened. And then further into the second half of the saber battle they had, the first half was so good. The second half, when again Rey begins to use the Force to help her in a saber battle, she absolutely destroys him, wrecks him, wipes the floor with him. And again, that shouldn't have happened. I don't mind her beating him so much, but it was the manner in which she did it. She wipes the floor with him, and again, it makes him look so weak. Because bear in mind, right, the end of the film. Let's get to the end of the film because it is related. At the end of this film, and this is one thing that a lot of people are going to be annoyed at. At the end of the film, Rey finds Luke. Luke has been missing for this entire film, which again I'll go into later on. He's been missing for this entire film. Luke Skywalker is literally in this film for 30 seconds to a minute. That is it. But she finds Luke, presumably to be trained by him, and Ren goes back to Snoke to be trained by Snoke, his master. Now, the problem here is the fact that Rey, who has already beaten Ren twice, is now going to be trained by Luke Skywalker, the most powerful Jedi in the universe. Whereas Ren, who is now lost twice to Rey, is going to be trained by Snoke, who we don't know anything about Snoke, but he can't be more powerful than Luke Skywalker, realistically. So in other words, you've got someone who's already won twice being trained by someone more powerful than the bad guys being trained by. How are we going to have any tension here? That's one thing that genuinely sort of mystifies me, because how are we going to take Ren seriously as a villain if he's already been beaten twice and now he's being trained by someone who isn't as powerful as Luke Skywalker? That doesn't really make any sense to me. I've got to be honest with you. But yeah, that just doesn't work. So now that we've got the main spoiler events out of the way, we can talk about what made these spoiler-free review so really hard to make, because the main plot details, because it was here that I had my main couple of criticisms, which made it very hard to sort of talk about the criticisms in the main review without spoiling anything. We can talk about the main plot. So the plot starts out with Luke Skywalker has vanished. He has disappeared. And we have Poe Dameron, played by Oscar Isaac, who has found a part of a star map which shows the location of Luke. He gives this to his droid, BB-8, who can escape while the village that Poe is in is attacked by the First Order. Now, that is as on the nose as I wanted this film to be when it came to referencing the first film, New Hope. You can have little one-liners, you can have little inside jokes, inside references, no problem with that. But the fact that you literally went with giving an incredibly vital piece of information to a droid to escape with is as on the nose as I want you to be when it comes to referencing the first A New Hope. That's as on the nose as I wanted them to be. Unfortunately, they go much more on the nose after that. Now, please bear in mind as I go on here, please remember I really did like this film. I loved this film. I had a great bloody time. However, in the second half of this film, they really did go. The similarities in the plot to A New Hope are way too strong. Way too strong. Because they introduce the Starkiller base, as was seen on the movie poster. They introduced the Starkiller base, and thank you, by the way, for that name, because I did enjoy that reference. But as the Resistance are having their, their planning meeting, essentially, they bring up the Starkiller base, and someone actually says, this isn't the new Death Star, because they literally show a picture of the Death Star scale and a picture of Starkiller scale, and it is huge. It's absolutely massive. But just saying this isn't the new Death Star, yes, it is. It's exactly what it is. It's an absolutely gargantuan, planet-shaped space station which has a single main weapon which can shoot and destroy planets. It is exactly the Death Star. It is the Death Star Mark III. That is literally what it is, for God's sake. And so they have their planning meeting to destroy the Starkiller base. And it involves, hitting again, using X-wings, etc., to hit a weak spot and destroy and blocking, shutting off shields, using X-wings to hit a weak spot. Boom, job done. And as I was watching that, I was literally thinking, so you are actually just using the plot now from A New Hope in terms of destroying the Death Star. Now we're going to destroy the Starkiller base. Really? You are just now rehashing the plot. That's all you're doing. Luckily, obviously, there was still the Rey versus Ren element of this, and that was much, much better because that was exceptional. I was loving that, but it did make the tandem plot of destroying the Starkiller base kind of uninteresting, just because you have literally seen this before, because it is literally the bloody plot from A New Hope. You couldn't have just made it a bit more different, like just a little bit. That's all I ask. I understand that you're making homage to the original films, but you don't have to go that far. You really don't have to go that far at all. That was my main problem with the film. I loved the film, but that did take me out of it a bit, just because I was sitting there going, I've literally seen this before, and so has everyone in the audience, because we've all seen A New Hope. That just seemed ridiculous. Other than that, though, I haven't got many things I can fault it on, because everything else it did, apart from having Rey wipe the floor with Ren, I really enjoyed. I have got one other tiny gripe, and that is Phasma. She was built up in that trailer. I genuinely thought she was going to be a proper, full-on badass. As I said in my original review, I was kind of hoping for a new Boba Fett. I really was, because I just want a new Boba Fett. Boba Fett's awesome. And seriously, she's utterly irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant in this film. I don't know how many lines she has, it's not many. But I don't think she actually does anything of any note whatsoever. She's in no way a badass, apart from being quite domineering on screen. She literally doesn't do anything of any note whatsoever. She's basically a complete waste of bloody time and effort. I don't really understand why they build her up so much just to have her do literally nothing in the film. That was a disappointment. It was pointless completely. But other than that, this is a great film. Great film. And the really big things they did perfectly, apart from Ren and Ray at the end. And the fact that that will not. I'm hoping that I'm still desperate to see episode 8. Desperate. But I am really kind of curious as to how they're now going to balance this out because they need Kylo Ren to still be this incredibly evil, dominant badass. And after the first film, he really isn't. I don't know how they're going to recover that, but I'm damn sure interested to find out.